وأما الآن فمع محاضرتنا الثانية ضمن اليوم الرابع من جدول محاضرات هذا الأسبوع في محاضرة مع المعمار أيمن توفيق بعنوان استراتيجيات التخطيط العمراني في الولايات المتحدة وآسيا.
مرحبا، اسمي أيمن توفيق, Associate Principal at KPF and Senior Designer. طبعا شكرا ArchiNet على الدعوة للمشاركة, وسعيد جدا أكون بين الأصدقاء والزملاء بالمهنة. المحاضرة راح تكون focused على الwork. So I'll talk about the project and the practice at KPF. So I work after graduating from Penn State University. I began working at KPF and I've been there for about 7 years. I work in the office in New York City, as you see here in the image, in the building to the left, right by Bryant Park. And our practice and the work and what I've been engaged with, we work in the design work, and usually is done in New York and the London office, where we have the larger offices, and the rest of the offices in Seoul, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Berlin, and San Francisco, Singapore. These are smaller offices. We do work with them closely on coordinating site visits, client relationship, and so on. In one hand, design in our practice is focused on context and driven by local. However, we found again and again that information transfer and learning is important to bring into other contexts as well. So during my project involvement and during my 7 years at KPF, I've been working globally on different sites and master plans across the globe. These are few of the locations that I've been focused on, and there are a few others in Southeast Asia. But the majority of the work today, I've been working on the Middle East, which I'm not able to share because of how confidential these projects are, and it's still not released to public. But in the soon future, I hope that I can engage them in this presentation. And my talk today really grew out of my interest and passion to urban design and cities. I studied architecture, but throughout my education, I traveled Korea and Japan and Rome, and I was always designing in cities from early age and really passionate. And specifically today, I'll discuss how concepts and initial ideas that are based on context, site visits, and the feel and look of place can be fused with intelligence, with far more analytical digital tools to shape cities and neighborhoods we engage in designing and planning. And I divided the talk to keep it short and to the point on practicing our workflow and what I do day to day in these master plans. And then as time allows, I will engage with some responses, some urban projects that I did in the United States and Asia. And if time allows, I will talk about our projects in Europe, Covent Garden. So these are the 3 case studies, but before that, I want to get through the practice and the workflow. So, a bit about our work, and you could define in so many ways, but key concepts and ideas comes from our belief in the power of urban architecture and design in cities that comes in multiple forms. We know cities comes in different forms, but the power of what cities offer is important, and having places for innovation, connection, and bringing people together is vital. we believe in strengthening that. And then the other point is the belief in the power of collaboration and innovation within a multi-generational global studio. So, as a firm, we work, and as a senior designer, I've been engaged and working closely with senior principals and mentors. I consider mentors like Hannah Qasim and Bruce Fisher on leading these design projects and master plans. And it's important for us because this is how we grow together. This is how ideas and initial thoughts comes together, and it can come from any team member. And it's important. We are 700 to 800 people or global office. 300 of us are in New York City, and others split in the other offices across the globe. We believe in intuition and the way we work in the projects. So there are two parts in the way I want to cover this lecture. Is there are the analog or the more intuitive approach to design, where ideas always comes from a sketch, and that sketch is driven from our experience, our understanding of the practice and our precedents library. And then the other part is the more analytical, data-driven scenarios that we use to come up with iteration. And also, as an architecture firm, I was able to engage with different typologies at early on. When I began the practice, I worked on hospitality, residential, hotel, offices, retail, and this understanding of how these different typologies comes together in terms of depth and width, where the core located, the efficiency of these different programs, and the needs for each program help us really build on that, our understanding of how to arrange things in city. We also, as in the firm, I work closely with environmental performance team and urban interface team, where they develop tools that help designers like myself efficiently and intelligently work on cities and do this initial studies and analysis to come up with a solution. We also, very important that is in developing these cities, we practice and advocate for mixed use and multiple scales. And it's like I said, it comes from our understanding of the DNA of buildings and how knowing how these elements can come together and form a space. And there's always interest and always push to how to create a livable place. And there is also ways of defining that in the way we engage these cities. But, we understand that a mixed use, an open space, and transit, creating a workplace around that would advocate for the idea of urbanism and create a vital place and dynamic. We also, among these tools, we work on different ways of how to approach the site. We maintain flexible on how we derive ideas by creating iterative process. Like you see in this image, where there is a lot of ways of engaging with the site, and through this early analytical studies, we come up with options, and that's how we tend to engage clients in the discussion. That's how we also internally discuss among us as a team in reviewing these iterations. Other, parameters I want to also highlight is, in creating a livable place, and how do we create a place where it's walkable, and we look at these in numbers, we look at these in radiuses, and we make sure that we are bringing these to the table in every project to the client, and also through our planning responses. Other studies can be through looking at how we create a visual experience. How do we study the blocks next to each other with our understanding of creating a space that is dynamic and not monotonous, something that has a peak like you see in this tiny diagram above, where we look at, let me just highlight this. This is really important, that we create a space that you have a variety of as you move in the space, you see more, and that's important. The other, aside and parallel to this all studies, we understand that it's important to work contextually and engage human scale in the beginning of the projects, and how we shape these neighborhoods. And so it always comes from site visits, field trips. We create a palette. So in this case, you see on the right is more industrial, looking at the different windows, looking at the structure, the different artifacts that we found. And another location, we look at materiality, textures, the feel and look. And that's how we come up with a palette that will define how we engage with these urban spaces. So it's not just looking at analytical and data, but really engaging human scale and culture and identity into these works. Now, other examples, I was working on a project in Baltimore where we look at artifacts, the rail track, the chimney, the spiral stairs that we found interesting from the warehouses, and also the color. And so these all comes as something important in creating this palette and creating something where we can always go back. It's almost like a guidance, a catalog that we can use in the way we shape these cities and neighborhoods. I think I went really fast, maybe, but going directly to the planning responses and of these three distinct neighborhoods. So I will not have the time to describe maybe all these examples and details and how initial concepts comes across, but I'll try to focus it on how we think of planning, using tools, using also our intuition and understanding of these places. So starting with the downtown West. So I'll cover using these examples, and some of them I was directly working on, and others are just examples we use as a workflow, and I want to share with you. In our work in America, and as part of this lecture, I want to talk about this example in downtown West in San Jose, California. And it's an 80-acre redevelopment in San Jose, and it's an example or a case study that we do a lot in our projects in the periphery of cities in the U.S., where these places wants to start to be more of a mixed use, revitalized, densify, and create a location or a destination for people to come to. So the original site plan was done by SiteLab. So they laid out the master plan, and KPF was hired to be the district or the precinct architect, with bringing the planning further toward completion. And and engaging other consultants within the project. So like I said, we always, start with, sometimes in site visits, there are these initial ideas comes from photos we take on the site, from looking at, the different textures, the materiality, artifacts, and it comes with something that we get inspired by and collage, sketch over, trace, and looking at the scale of how these things are engaged, height, and so on. And then so for us, these then comes later to being pinned up and critiqued by the team, and looking at how do we transform these cities from something more constant, in language, something more monotonous, to something more diverse, and have a variety of spaces that people can come to and engage with. So we start with this understanding, with this sketches and ideas, diagrams, and then this comes from, like I said, from our experience, and as a firm we work together in teams, so a lot of people have different understanding of typologies that they can advise on the projects and work with our main design team. Then sometimes maybe before that I will go to we map out sometimes the existing site, looking at Google, looking at the GIS, looking at open resource maps to look at discover areas of opportunities, and the goal is how to allow this new development to engage well with the surrounding. That means sometimes through creating paths, continuing paths that already exist, and we build upon that, or bringing new programs that the site needs, or engage with an existing program and use it as a way to connect and continue the journey. So this is, and this also diagram comes in multiple forms. It could also come in the way where we just create a blob diagram, big picture, just site forces, understand where things can be engaging with the site. In another way, we can also just in a land use and a color program where we look at these different programs. And then sometimes we move on to looking at it in a 3D where we start building blocks. And like I said, these tools we use in UI, we have in Rhino plugins or sometimes in Grasshopper, like Ladybug, and the way we can use to calculate thermal analysis and understand how these facades will be engaged with the sun, and try different iteration and in a way that we help us come up with the solution. And so we build these models for every block, sometimes collectively, so we can see how they also impact each other, because that's also part of the study. But this is just a zoom in on one spot and showing you how we would start diving deep and looking at alternatives. And all this stuff, all the studies will lead to this image where we're looking at an intimate retail, a place where it's open, has an open space, engaging people, bringing people together, and a mix of the scale, and all that is also influenced by the culture of the place, the colors you see, the pavements, what this place wants to be also in the future. So you look at all that together. And of course, very important to integrate the green space and create a sustainable place for people to live and live long. And then, these projects in the office, as you see, it's really massive in scale. And, many of these projects will be built in decades, in 1 decade or 2, 3. And so archiving the information and making sure that all these initial ideas that starts the project with can continue throughout the phases is a challenge. And, you know, and this also involves a lot of consultants, hundreds. In many cases, there are consultants being onboarded. So for us, it's important to use tools. So in this way, the office started using a tool called Scout. It's like a platform where all the information can be from us, from other consultants, can be placed there, and making sure that they are all up to date and they are engaged with the timeline, so people understand where the project is now on any time, and stakeholders can be able to track the project easily, understand the changes. It also helps onboarding other consultants. So that's a very important aspect in our practice, and I think comes really handy, especially creating like hundreds of layers of diagrams and zoning, and these also sometimes the regulation policies and zoning changes throughout the time, throughout the years. So making sure we understand where these things started, it's also key to bring these projects to life, and that's something that you see in layers placed on this web. And this is then the other layer to it. And in some projects, we were able to engage with the city, with the people, with the locals, in town halls, and in gatherings where we, use this platform to engage the community. You see here that toggle for density or building shape or thermal analysis. What this does is by raising these toggles up or bringing these toggles down, it helps the community understand the impact on, for example, shadows and open spaces. What does it mean to densify? What does it mean to lower that density? And help them be part of the decision making. And so this is really also important in a lot of projects in New York City, there's projects in Hawaii, and other projects in China, we do make sure that people take part of it as we can and as timeline allows for it. So this is the delivery in some cases, you see it in this platform. And other projects in Internet City in Shenzhen, China. So NBBJ won the master plan, and KPF comes in to engage on this one block and create a study for the block within this larger master plan. And what you see here is this promenade that has been initially put in the master plan that we have to respect and work with, which is important to connect the different blocks of this master plan. And of course, it starts always with an initial sketch. You see in this funny sketch on the left where the red is the promenade. And the idea was to bring in hues toward the water and create a central hub, a courtyard, where it's almost like a stop point within each block. People can come together and engage. Now, and this is a party diagram that leads from the sketches, and you see the hub, the connectors, and the forest. And then we also have to look at it, how these vertical buildings can be responsive, climate responsive, and be protected. So we're working in an environment where in Shenzhen it's humid, it's hot. It's important to protect these facades and look at all the layers of energy, comfort, and resiliency. Depends on where it's engaged in context. Flooding in a lot of cases in China is important to pay attention to and work with. And then of course this later becomes a 3D study, and it comes with a simple massing first before we start manipulating and changing. Then these studies and these analytical tools start to help us to infuse more intelligence into them in shaping these. So if we want to create open space, we know it's important to create these open spaces. These tools will help us to decide on the location and direction, and then creating this diagram that is more than just an intuitive response. It's something been thought out. So you see the common here breaking through the massing, the forest or that urban hub in the middle in green, and there is the public artwork, we call it, that intersect with the commons. This is another diagram showing the wind, how it's engaged. It's coming from the east and the northeast, so it's important to open the buildings from the water toward the water, and that also influences a lot of the shaded courtyards. But it's more analytical, and we use parametric tools to come up with these, and work with other teams within the office that are focused specifically on developing these tools. And another response will be on how to improve these massing from the initial original master plan to through use of shading tools, through the use of thermal analysis to protect these facades. And then we work on shaping the facades, orienting the buildings to come up with the right results. And of course, we look at how do we then look at the facade itself and then define the different wall types in terms of using of canopies, screens, the different glass coating that will allow to protect the building in the interior from these high temperature. Another way of also looking at this is, we want to create a space where it's comfortable for people to walk outside. And so then we had to introduce a canopy based on the shadow analysis. So understanding where the shadow hit the ground or the open spaces throughout the day will influence, the pedestrian walkers and the location of these canopies. And a lot of projects today in the Middle East that I work on is more than just a canopy. We have to introduce, environmentally friendly tools to bring breeze, and sometimes just creating spaces with water to change the temperature locally within different spots on this master plans. So, but this is in China, so we're showing you an example here that shows this. And of course, it leads to an image where this is the first view that you'll see at the office drop-off, and we wanted to ensure that the space is welcoming and inviting throughout the year. 2 more minutes, it runs fast, but I'll walk through. This is an image of how we integrate green spaces, and we study open and closed spaces. I don't know if I will be able to cover everything. This is 5 minutes walk. It could be in radius, or it could be also in just drawing, measuring the length of a line, a polyline. And in a lot of these projects, we think of water and how we, the concept of sparsity. How do we collect water on these horizontal surfaces, on the roofs, on the plazas, open spaces, rainforests, rain gardens, and we measure that in number to understand how much water we have. In for example, in our project in Hudson Yards, it's been executed where you collect water and use it as a not necessarily potable water, but use it as a gray water and has less important uses in not for drinking, but for let's say use in the restrooms and kitchen and so on. I think I will have to, it's already 30 minutes, so I'm not going to be able to tap on the Covent Garden, but I'll stop here for questions.
Thank you, Engineer Ayman Tawfiq, for this insightful workshop, webinar or lecture. We're going to move on to the Q&A session. The first question received is, how do modern urban planning strategies consider the optimal balance between high density and low density development? And how does this impact resource consumption and the quality of life?
So I think this is really important question. I think we talked about density, because right now, post-pandemic, we understand that density is sometimes good to bring people together, to innovate, but also can be in a place where it's a bit risky. In for example, in the pandemic, we had to live through this, but we have to balance that, and it depends on the location. I think we still want to advocate for people to come together, and this is how innovation can happen. People can engage together. I think finding the right balance is really, I have to say, it's has to be contextual and have to be driven by what do we need, what's the task of the projects, and then through that we have to look at a balance. I think it definitely changed. To answer the question, it changed, and we, from early on, we're trying to understand how we respond to the different projects in a different way. So one way is, I think, engaging green space, right? So for example, now the idea of office space, before it was about this very compact, very dense rows of seats in offices. Currently, the concept of an office space, for example, has changed. We need more green spaces, more engagement with outdoor, indoor, less dense, in a way where it allows for people to have their own space. And I think the engagement of green spaces is one of the ways to tackle the problem, but it's not the solution or the final solution for it. We're in the middle of researching that as well.
Absolutely.
How that the question?
Well, I mean, on the topic of balance as well as context, the question rises on how urban planners strike the balance between preserving historical and architectural heritage while accommodating the modernization and technological advancement in urban areas.
Right. No, I think this the planning of these cities. Some of the projects I showed, I think I didn't get to look at the Covent Garden example, which I think it's more of an intervention. So, I mean, it depends on, some projects are just plain land, blank space. But in a lot of projects I've been working on, and I think I didn't have that. But there's a whole talk we can discuss on adaptive reuse and the idea of how to intervene with an existing context that has history, has culture, and how to carefully and surgically engage that. I think it's important, and that will have a whole talk. But paying attention to that and documenting what really exists is the first step toward designing the project. And I think it's important to pay attention to. In a lot of projects that are in the office, and my previous project, I would share maybe that in a whole other lecture. It was really about just starting with an existing condition, and that has to be treated a whole different way. And preservation is sustainable practice, and we are always advocating for that. So I think it's important, and I would agree that we need to pay attention to it. But that will be another talk. Maybe the next time I'll be talking about that.
Inshallah. Architect Ayman, could you expand further on the role of mixed-use zoning and its influence on urban design, especially on promoting walkability and reducing the need of extensive commuting in urban areas?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I tapped on this quick, but I think, from initially, how we started the talk is we believe in the idea of diversity and creating something more of a mixed use in throughout the different cities, especially in, let's say, in the project in San Jose and a lot of projects in the periphery of cities in the US, that this zoning has been changed. And recently in the New York, they've been looking at also introducing residential, because we have, challenge in affordable residential. So, these changes are important, and, zoning has been changed based on the needs for people. So whether this is just changing for the sake to create a destination and a place where people can engage in, or is something as important and as vital to being in a city is as residential and affordable residential right now is a really hard to, live in a very expensive, like the city has been it's moving toward really, less affordable every day. And so the city is constantly looking at changing this zoning, and it's very important. And we are working with that, and we always like to engage because we advocate for these changes as we find necessary to continue the concept of livability in cities.
Sure thing. The last question from Sarah Nafi. How have you engaged with the local communities and residents in the planning process to ensure that their needs and preferences are considered and integrated into the design solutions created by your office?
I think there's another project that, it's sometimes like with, this short lecture couldn't cover everything, but there's really important projects in NYCHA, for NYCHA and New York City, where we had housing that suffered the Sandy hurricane. It was flooded, and there is, and then we had to engage with the city through town halls. This will be meetings sometimes in an office or in the township of the city, where we meet with local players in the city, with the people itself, and try to create a workshop where we sketch together, understand what the problems are. And then when it comes to the process of working and designing, the community can come in so many different ways. One way in the NYCHA projects, where we bring in local artists to paint more murals, to create some of these elements in the public spaces, from the benches to the seating to the design of recycling bins. So there is a lot of ways. I think this is one way. I showed another way where we are using our Scout platform we're invited by Google to create this, platform. I think I showed it somewhere in this project, where we engage them while we're planning in a work session, where they were, playing with these tools and trying to come closer to our understanding of how these cities should be shaped based on, the concept of open space, the concept of, creating spaces that are shaded, and so on.
Thank you for your participation with us in the Arab Architecture Week, and we hope for further collaboration with yourself as well as your design office. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
You too.
Shukran, Zina. Bye.